Alright guys, this video is about incorporating quotes into our essay. We want to make sure that we do it the right way. Remember, you have to use a minimum of 3 direct quotations or document references in your essay to meet the requirements. You could use more, but the minimum that I'll be looking for you to meet the rubric expectations is 3. Okay, so in order to incorporate quotes, we can use a simple formula here that I have on the screen. It's basically framing a quote. So we need to be able to do 4 things, essentially, if we're going to use evidence to support a claim in our thesis. We need the context of the quote. We need the reason that we're using it. Basically, what am I going to show with this quote or this source? We need the actual the quote or phrase we're paraphrasing. And then we have to explain the significance. So this is the so what part. How does it relate to my thesis or my claim? Okay. So you have this sheet and there are sentence stems here to help you do that. So you can use these sentence starters to help you do each part of the quote as you write it in your paper. And I'm going to show you an example of how we're going to do that now. So I'm going to start a new slide here, a new doc. So after I've written my background information and I've written my thesis, I'm getting into my first paragraph now. And one of the first things in my essay that I talked about in the example yesterday was climate. So I mentioned something in the claims and the examples that the New England and Southern colonies had different climates which caused them to develop different economies. So that's my claim. So I'm claiming that the New England and Southern colonies each had different climates and that helped them develop different economies. This relates back to my thesis because I'm showing how these two regions are different. And now I need some evidence to support this. Okay, so if we go back to our DBQ documents, when we went through here, again, we answered a bunch of questions related to each source. So I want to find the sources that help me talk about climate and geography and also economy. So I know that that source E, document E, is about the reported weather conditions in New England. And when we went down here and answered the questions, we said that the climate in New England was cool most of the year, freezing in the winter, and it could have affected their ability to grow crops, make a profit, which affected their economy. Also let them depend more on trade and industries to sustain the colony. So the answers to these questions are basically me paraphrasing what makes this chart or makes this evidence important. So I want to use this in my essay. So going back to incorporating quotes, I need to provide the context, the reason, the quote, and the significance. So I'm going to frame it out. Okay. One important thing to think about here is that where it says in source or in type of doc, we don't ever want to use the artificial title of the document. We don't ever want to say in document E. That's an artificial title given to it by me, the teacher, to organize the source. How we want to refer to it when we frame it is by the source title. So reported weather conditions in New England. So with incorporating quotes, I would say in reported weather conditions of New England. So let's start here. In a chart of reported weather conditions in New England from 1609 9 to 1699. So there we go. So I provided context, right? Now I need to do reason. The data describes the climate of England. Or, to be more, describes New England's climate. I like that better. And then this is, so this is the reason we use it, because it shows the climate. Now we need to describe the quote or document. So in our pictures and in our charts, we can't exactly quote it. We're not going to use a direct quotation. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to paraphrase what we see. So when we see charts and when we see pictures, we're going to paraphrase. When we have sources that have actual words in them, we're going to use a direct quotation. Okay? So I like our answer to these questions here. Says that so the chart shows that the climate in England was cool most of the year, and this affected their ability to grow crops, make a profit, which also affected their economy. So the climate of New England was cool most of the year, freezing in the winter. This is going to be the observation we make. And then the second part here is going to be our so what. It affected their ability to grow crops and make a profit, which affected their economy. It led them to depend more on trade and industry to sustain the colony. Okay? So in the sample essay here, I'm going to basically take this, because this was our answer. This was what we paraphrased. I'm going to put it in the essay. So I'm just going to say the chart shows, because you go back to incorporating quote, right? According to the chart. But here, author says, author writes, author argues. So the chart shows, the author shows. The chart shows, and then I'm just going to use that the climate of New England was cool most of the year, freezing in the winter. Okay. Now I've just taken this information from the chart. So I need to provide a citation. And this is where it might get a little confusing. But here is where we're going to use that artificial document title. So this was from document E. So after where I wrote what I actually got from the chart, I'm going to put document E. That way, the reader knows that this is where this evidence came from. Then after that, I'm going to go and I'm going to include my significance, which again, I really like the way that we answered this question. So we can just take this directly and we can put it in our essay. So I'm just going to change that to the climate. And then rather than saying could have, that makes the essay sound, it makes our argument sound weak, as if we don't know if it did or not. I'm going to argue that it did, so I'm just going to delete that, and I'm going to say the climate affected their ability to grow crops and make a profit, which also affected their economy. This led, and instead of them, I'm going to say New Englanders, to depend more on trade or industry to sustain the colony. Now this is my so what. This relates back to the claim, it supports my claim, and it relates back to my thesis that we wrote earlier in class. Okay? So this is how we use the sentence stems and we frame it. And in this case, we paraphrase something from the source. So we put our citation right after where we paraphrased, and we don't put quotation marks around that. If we use a direct sentence from the sources, then we would put quotation marks around it. So I'll show you an example of that using actual words and quoting it. So we're writing about the New England and the Southern colonies here. So I've got my quote about New England. Now I want to put something in the South. So since this is a comparison or contrasting essay, I want to transition by saying, in comparison, this is a phrase that you're going to use a lot in your essay, in comparison. You're going to use that then to transition, talk about the South. So in comparison, the Southern colonies had a much warmer climate. Now I'm going to go to my source here from Robert Horn in a description of Carolina, which is document G. And I really like this quote here where he says, the summer is not too hot, the winter is very short and moderate, and the best agreeing with English constitutions. I want to use that in my essay to show that the South's climate was much warmer. So, again, going to my incorporating quotes. So in source, author describes, author says, accordingly, therefore, thus, this shows. I'm going to put that in my essay. Okay? So I'm going to go back. So I have my, in comparison, the Southern colonies has a much warmer climate. So in a brief description of the province of Carolina, and I should put this in italics because it is a, I should have done the same thing here. This is a title, so I should italicize that. Robert Horn describes how wonderful South Carolina's climate is. He explained, or let's just say, he writes, here's where I use my quotations, and I go back to my quote here. The summer is not too hot, the winter is very short and moderate. And I can just put that in there. Good. Period. And then this is from document G. Okay. Now, when we go back to this, we'll say, talk about, what makes this significant then. So we said that the Carolina is a great place to live and grow cash crops due to the amazing climate and geography. So I want to put that in there. Thus, South Carolina climate was great for growing cash crops and agriculture, which was different compared to New England. Not compared. Okay? So in this instance, we use the actual words. So we use the quotation. We put that in quotation marks. We have our period, and then our citation in parentheses, the document that we got it from. Okay? It's a little different than English class in MLA style, where we would have the author's name and the page number, or something along those lines. Here, we're using those artificial citations from where we got the sources. But when we refer to them in our writing, we're using the title when we're framing the quote. So for the context there, we're using the actual name of the real name of the source. But when we do our citation in our essay, we're using parentheses doc G. Okay? And I just want to point out that in the rubric, the scoring rubric, that providing the proper context, the reason for the quote, an appropriate quote, the significance of the quote, and the citation the right way, as I have here, is about 50% of the points in the paper. That's 5 out of the 10 categories. So this is a huge part of your paper. So take some time, watch this video, rewatch this video, go back to the sample essay, and make sure that you're doing it right so that you're incorporating quotes the proper way. And if you have any questions, you can ask me in class on Monday.